if us within forensics are not providing our customers, the investigating officers, the most appropriate quality of data to make their decisions on, then that's where bad decisions get made. Making sure that we've got good quality process and good tools and technology underpinning that process to get a good quality evidence into the criminal justice system is absolutely a must. My name is David Matthews and I'm the Regional Forensic Video and Audio Manager for Avon Somerset, which is a part of the Southwest Forensics collaboration. My job is to look after a team of people who are responsible for the recovery, processing, analysis and subsequent court presentation of media evidence, which includes CCTV. In the field of CCTV, you've got thousands, if not tens of thousands of different formats. The problem and one of the biggest risks that we have, I suppose, within our area is quite simply being able to put that media in front of an officer so that they can review it to make a decision as to whether something has happened. And that's kind of the bread and butter of the job, really. So having a one-stop shop where you can actually load your data into it, have it do all of that heavy lifting for you, and ensure, again, the quality of the evidence that's actually popping out the other end when you do your sort of reformatting of that data was exactly what our customers needed. So the Forensic Science Regulator has quite rightly taken a look at all forensic providers across the UK, whether they're private or public, and is essentially telling those businesses that they need to up their game, that they need to start delivering a much better quality service. So with that came the implementation of ISO 17025 across forensic laboratories in the UK. Now, as part of that sort of ISO implementation, you've got some functions that have to be accredited, and then you've got other functions that don't necessarily need to be accredited. That could be done by anybody. So what we needed was a system that would allow for the majority of people to be able to make use of it outside of scope of ISO. On top of that, we had a digital first policy implemented within the force, which meant that we had to move away from specific kiosk solutions where you would have software loaded on a kiosk and everybody would have to book or queue for that particular kiosk. But crucially, those kiosks are generally sat off the force network. Now, the prerequisites of the system were fairly straightforward. It needed to be something that could be scalable. It needed to be something that could be deployed across our force network. And crucially, and the most important sort of part of all of it, is it needed to be a system that maintained the quality of evidence as we needed to be, being in the middle of a forensic discipline. From there, we ultimately landed with Amped Replay, as that was the one that was mostly able to meet our requirements around the quality of evidence, but also some of the functionality, which we didn't even know we needed until we saw it, frankly. Essentially, media files and three-tiered wedding cakes in a box are very similar in many ways. So a cake can have three different layers. A video is generally made up of three different layers. So you've got a video stream, you've got an audio stream, and you've got a subtitle stream that sits underneath that. A media file will sit inside a container, so your MP4, your .avi, sort of things like that. That's just a container that holds these different streams of media that sit inside it. And then on top of the box, you might have a label that explains how to ship this box from one place to another, and then how to open the box and eat the cake when you get to the other side, which is your codec, essentially. So when it comes to forensics, we have a bunch of different ways that we can approach reformatting our media files. And there is a hierarchy sort of in that process on what you should do and what you should try and avoid. So the first thing that you would want to always try is review that media in its native form. So basically eating that cake sort of as it is. So just take it out of the box, eating the cake. The next stage that we would come to in terms of quality is really, we're probably going to be looking at a stream copy at this point. Now, what a stream copy is essentially the same as opening the box with the cake in it, getting a new box, taking the cake out of the box and putting it into the other box, and then eating the cake from that box. Essentially what you're doing is you're eating exactly the same cake. It hasn't changed, it's still the same thing. So that would be our next sort of port to call. In forensic terms, what that would be is taking the video, audio, and subtitle streams from one media container and essentially copying and pasting them into a new one. So we can now work with it on our computer, but it's still essentially the same thing. A transcode, on the other hand, which is kind of the next level sort of in the process, is essentially the same as the baker following their own recipe to the letter and then baking a new cake and sticking it in the container. It looks the same, tastes the same, smells the same, but ultimately it's a different cake. The next stage that we would come to is capture, or as we refer to it as capture. From an actual processing video perspective, that could be using a screen recorder, that could be feeding a video stream into an application and capturing it from there. It's about making a copy of something. From the cake perspective, it would be the same as providing a recipe with some of the information missing to a different baker, getting them to bake it. They've maybe seen a photograph of the cake and they maybe got an understanding of what it should taste like and kind of what it should smell like because they've baked these kind of cakes before. When you look at it, it may look roughly the same. It may smell kind of the same as the original. It may taste more or less the same, but it'll be a bit different. Ultimately, it's quite similar, but it's not the same. So in policing, we can't just rely on something looking similar or looking okay. When we're making decisions on the video evidence that we're busy looking at, those decisions can affect people's lives. They can put people in prison, they can keep people out of prison. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that anything that we're busy working with, anything that we're looking at is as higher quality or true to life as is physically possible or as achievable. Within digital forensics, we've got 4 core key principles that we need to sort of adhere to. They're essentially the bedrock upon which all of our policy is designed. Those 4 principles are: Principle 1, you're not supposed to change the data that you're busy working on. Principle 2, you need to be competent to work on what you're working on. You need to be competent in the processes that you're busy sort of conducting in the office. Principle 3 is you need to be documenting sufficient contemporaneous notes or notes that anything that you've done can be reproduced by a third party if required. And the 4th principle is that the person doing the work is responsible for making sure that they adhere to those first 3 principles, as it were. Now, where that becomes relevant within the video forensic sort of area of business is that Principle 1, where you're not supposed to be changing the data. Essentially, stream copy is the only one that allows for us to achieve that, where we've got a format of video that is unsupported on systems and we need to be able to do something with it. Because whilst the container itself might be changing, so yes, we're changing some data there, the actual evidential material that we're going to be working on, which is the video stream, the audio stream, and the subtitle stream, are not. Those are being copied across as they were from one container file into another. So whilst we can use transcoding, and in some instances the quality of transcodes can be sufficient, as a business area we should be defaulting to look for either playing the video footage back in its native format or moving towards a stream copy. Situations that we could be faced with if these processes sort of aren't sound, if they aren't quality driven, if they don't have a quality assurance mechanism around that, and if we aren't able to sort of authenticate the quality of the data that we've been working on. So where that could potentially cause an issue is, well, first and foremost, we can have the evidence thrown out of court. Now, the simplest way to have a case very easily thrown out of court is to tackle the evidence itself. For technicians to not be processing evidence appropriately, for the principles not to be adhered to be followed to the forensic science regulators' requirements not to be adhered to. So if I were working for the defence, the first thing I'd be looking at is the process. I'd be looking at the evidence that had been submitted to me and confirming that the processes that those investigators had employed were appropriate for the method. Did they do things properly? Did they sort of cut corners? So if any of that is proven to be true, where appropriate processes weren't deployed on that particular piece of work, or where corners were cut, then it becomes a very simple case of being able to arrange for that evidence to be made inadmissible in court. So I've been quite fortunate sort of here in Avon and Somerset in that not only do I have a very brave leadership team within Avon and Somerset Police, I also have equally brave leadership within Southwest Forensics who have been willing to try something different, try something new. So as a result of that, What we have is very good high quality process, very good high quality policy, and appropriate systems that underpin all of the processing of this evidential material, which means that none of those things are concerns for us. The benefits that we've seen in our office are we've seen a 60% reduction in submitted exhibits and sort of cases to my department purely within the first 2 months of delivery. So what this has meant for our team, because of the reduction in sort of work that's coming through to the office, means that we can focus on those specialist services that we should be sort of performing for our victims of crime. So when you've got highly specialist video technicians working in an office, they shouldn't be spending their time just getting things ready so that an officer doesn't have to sit in a 12-week backlog of evidence. They should be able to focus on their investigative work, and officers should be allowed to focus on their investigative work. Our frontline officers are now empowered to be able to continue with their investigations as soon as they get back to the office, and my team have the time that they need in order to focus on those high-risk sort of investigations that they should be working on. Having somebody who actually understands what the issues are that you're faced with, but also specifically why you can maybe be a little bit difficult with some of your requirements, is an absolute must. Because we have this relationship with best evidence, and because the experience of best evidence is specifically within policing, it made having those conversations really easy. Ultimately, we wouldn't have been able to achieve what we've achieved so far without the support of Best Evidence UK and AMP software in helping us to deliver AMP replay across our network. It has completely changed the landscape within Avon Somerset as to how we go about investigating crime. It's reduced the amount of exhibits coming into my department within forensics. It's reduced the amount of time that it takes to investigate crime from anything between 2 to 4 weeks for the average case that has CCTV as an element of it. And ultimately, because of those two things, it's increased the quality of the service that we provide to our victims of crime.